Chaim Bracha.
El Chaim Baruch. Okay, we're going to begin tonight with a story of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was once visited by a chassid of his, who was a great Torah scholar, and he was very knowledgeable in both all areas of Torah. And he had to marry off his children. He needed money to marry off his children. He also needed money to pay his creditors. He owed money to a lot of people. And he came to the Alter Rebbe. He told the Alter Rebbe that he needs money because he owes all these people money. And he said to the Alter Rebbe that it's going to be a chillul Hashem. It's going to be a desecration of God's name if he doesn't pay back all the money that he owes to these people. So the Alter Rebbe leaned on his holy arms, and he went into a state of dvekus, a state of complete rapture, complete attachment to Hashem. The Alter Rebbe said, "You're only asking what you need, but what you're needed for, you're not asking." When he heard this, according to another version, the Alter Rebbe said that there's some kind of hidden yeshus, some kind of hidden sense of self, some kind of gasas haruach, some kind of arrogance that is beneath his words. And when he heard this, that the Alter Rebbe said, "You're only asking what you need, what you're not asking what you needed for," he fainted. The Alter Rebbe said that you're needed to illuminate your surroundings with Torah and service of Hashem, and if you do what you need, Hashem will do what you need from Him. In other words, you want Hashem to sustain your family, you want Hashem to give you enough income to marry off your daughters and to pay your creditors. Do what you need, and Hashem will do what you need from Him. Focus on what you need to do, what you're needed for, what your role is. That's what the Alter Rebbe said. Now, clearly, that the Alter Rebbe's words were asking of this man something beyond him, because he fainted. It was something which was completely beyond his perspective, and he had some kind of an epiphany that literally made him fall down and faint. Because although he was a great Torah scholar and a very generous person, doing a lot of great things, but at the end of the day, he was self-centered. It was all about himself. He was the center. And even when he was talking about desecrating God's name, it still revolved around himself. But he doesn't want to cause the desecration of God's name. And so the Alter Rebbe was summoning in him something beyond where he was. The Alter Rebbe was asking him to go to a level beyond where he was, where he's not the center. And that was something that was completely foreign to him. And that's why he fainted. Chassidus talks about the giving of the Torah, and how when Hashem gave us the Torah, we saw what is usually heard, and we heard what was usually seen. And one perspective that Chassidus gives to this is that our power of sight and our power of hearing are very distinct. But they're only distinct if we look at the power of sight and the power of hearing in their respective arenas. But there is a higher, deeper way that these soul powers are in their source. And in their source, they aren't distinct. There is no separation. In other words, if we talk about the essence of godliness, in the face of the essence of godliness, so the power of sight and power of hearing are both just tools to serve Hashem. They're not distinct. Therefore, it's possible for them to combine. So there is truth, and there's the truth of truth. Truth is, as Maimonides says, the middle road. It's about balance. It's about reality being real, not just being too extreme, looking at the whole picture. But that's just one level of truth. Then there's a truth of truth, where it's not just about not being extreme. It's about removing the whole shell of the physical reality and seeing the truth of Hashem that pervades reality. And that's why this chassid was so overwhelmed, because the Alter Rebbe was telling him something he said, Alter was telling him basically, like, you reach somewhere and you have some connection to truth, but I want you to do more. I want you to reach a higher level. It shouldn't be about what you need. It should be about what you're needed for. Similarly, now there's a famous story, the Rebbe Rashab, where the Rebbe Rashab, actually, I'm sorry, the Rebbe Marash, rather, Rebbe Marash, it was before Shavuos. I shared the story a few months ago, I believe. And there was a chassid, the Rebbe Marash, who was very down on his luck financially. And the Rebbe Marash was on the balcony, and the Rebbe Marash called over this chassid and said to him, guests are coming, many guests. You have to prepare for all the guests. So he told this chassid that he should prepare beds, prepare food for all the many, many guests that are coming. And after Yontiv, the Rebbe Marash would take care of the expense that it would cost to take care of all these guests. So this guy, he told his wife what had happened, and they went to borrow whatever they could, borrow beds, borrow money, and so they really went all out, and they were able to make an extraordinary Shavuos for hundreds of people. The problem was nobody arrived. And as Yontiv got closer and closer, his household and his friends and all those who had participated in the city of Lubavitch, everyone heard that Rebbe Marash had said their guests are coming. They all were a little chagrined. This guy made up something. Are you sure you heard right? What exactly were the Rebbe Marash say? Would these guests are coming today, or guests are coming for Pesach? Guests are coming for Sukkot? What are you talking about? There are no one arrived. But a few minutes before Yontif, whole caravan of wagons of Hasidim arrived in the city of Lubavitch, and they didn't even have enough. There was so many people that came. They didn't have enough to barely to take care of all the many guests. So what the Rebbe Marash predicted was came to fruition. And so after Yontiv, the chassid came back to the Rebbe Marash to make an account of all that the Rebbe Marash had said he would pay for to provide for all these guests. But the chassid apparently wasn't so intelligent. And so he told the Rebbe Marash he had a certain complaint about what had happened. He said, you said guests were coming, but they weren't coming. In other words, he had suspected that the Rebbe Marash was looking out, and he sees guests are coming, and they didn't show. Like, what was that about? So Rebbe Marash responded, if it's a very sunny day, if it's a warm, sunny day, and you're in a high place, you could see far away. The Rebbe Marash was saying something which had two layers, that if you're staying in a higher place, you could see far away. He's also saying that if it's spiritually a warm day, spiritually it's a luminous day, and you're in a higher position, you could see a lot farther. So that's what tonight is about. Tonight is the anniversary of the time when we stood before Mahashem at Mount Sinai, and we said we will do even before we understand. And because of our loving declaration to Hashem that we'll be His, and we'll do whatever Hashem asks us to do even before we understand, that caused the great, overwhelming divine response when God asked all the angels to give every single Jew 2 crowns. 1 crown because we said we will do, another crown because we said we will listen and understand the words of the Torah. So that declaration that we said that we will do, we don't have to understand, we're just going to follow you, Hashem, is something that is connected to today. Today is the anniversary when we said it to Hashem. And I wanted to share a story which highlights this, how sometimes an instruction is given from Hashem through a tzaddik, and it may take a long time, sometimes 50 years, before before you can understand what the message was, what the importance was of what the tzaddik was saying. But you have to follow, we will do, and you may not understand for another 50 years. So story, I was just in New York, and I heard the story from Rabbi Moshe Yamenson, a story that in his family. Unbelievable story. It was in 2007. The 2 brothers, Rachmiel and Shalom Dov Ber Ben Yamenson, were in the law office of a certain Lena Rosenberg, and they were trying to arrange for their mother to move from Montreal to New York. Their mother Zlata had just lost her husband Nachum Yosef, and she was 80 years old. and they thought it would be a lot better for her to live close to, although the family originates from Montreal, they thought it'd be a lot better for her to be next to her children who had moved to Crown Heights and be around her children instead of living alone in Montreal. The problem was that she needed Medicaid. And in order to get Medicaid, you have to be a U.S. citizen. And because she was not a U.S. citizen, it's very hard to, the United States isn't so quick to give visas to everyone who asks and to make citizenship so quickly. So it would be hard for her to move to New York because she needs Medicaid. She has extensive doctor visits that need to be covered by insurance. It was impossible for her to move without the Medicaid. But on the other hand, it was also impossible to get citizenship. So what should she do? So her son, Rabbi Yerachmiel Ben Yamson, he is the director of the organization called Tzivos Hashem, the Army of Hashem, in New York, International Organization Center in New York. And he had gone to Montreal to help his mother clean out the house. And among the things that they had noticed was a box of old documents. Instead of throwing them out, he took the documents with him. Because he was so busy, he didn't have a chance to running this international organization. He didn't have a chance till a few days later to see what was in the box, what kind of documents there were. And he noticed that in the box, there are 2 green cards. Now, green cards are the term that's used in one of the stages of becoming a U.S. citizen. You get this permission to be in America to work, but they're not green. They originally were green, but these were really, really old green cards that were actually green. And these were different than today's green cards because today's green cards have a lot of limitations. You can come to America, you could work, how long you're going to be here, what kind of work, when you're going to become a citizen. But these green cards were very unique. Zaman. They were very unique in that they had no limitations. That means that there was no rules at all. These green cards were completely open for permanent residency in America. And so he asked his mother, where'd you get these cards from? And his mother had no idea. And he asked her again. And what emerged was the following story. His mother, Zlata Wurzburger, was her maiden name, was 16 years old when the Holocaust began. And fortunately, she had gone through 7 concentration camps. Eventually, her father had gone to Ireland, and her father had seen her name on one of the lists of survivors. And so her father took her from Germany on a military plane to Ireland, where she lived with her father. This family, okay. Her father, Nachum Yosef, was originally born in the city called Babroisk. He was born in Babroisk in 1923. And his father, Nachum Yosef's father, got a job in Zlobin to work as a rabbi in Zlobin. He was one of the 10 Hasidim that the previous Rebbe called in one day to make a pact with. The previous Rebbe called in 10 Hasidim one day, and he told them he wants to make a pact with them, a Krisas Bris, a covenant with them, that they will dedicate their lives to spread Torah and Judaism in Soviet Russia to the last drop of blood. To the last drop of blood, they made this pact with the previous Rebbe that they're going to go all the way. So he was one of those 10 Hasidim, and he successfully, in Zlobin, made this made mikvahs, made schools, and because of this, Nachum Yosef's father was arrested. But because he was so beloved by the people of his city in Zlobin, they made a tumult to the KGB. They made this big stir, and the KGB released him shortly after his arrest, which was very unusual. It just shows how much love his people in his town had for him. But after his arrest and subsequent release, it was clear that he could no longer stay anymore in Zlobin. So at that time, his wife had these terrible terrible eye ailment, and the best doctors at the time were in Riga in Latvia, and so it was possible to make a request from the Soviet government to leave Russia because of his wife's condition. This would be considered a legitimate reason to leave Russia because of her condition. But despite it being something that the Soviet government might accept, it was very, very rare for anyone to get a visa, to get a permit to leave Soviet Russia. So he contacted the previous Rebbe, and the previous Rebbe exerted his influence to help Nachum Yosef move to Latvia, and the process of getting a visa through regular channels was very, very rare that it went through. So instead, Nachum Yosef's father went to Moscow to meet the president of Russia, Kalinin, President Kalinin. If you actually met Kalinin, then there was a lot greater chance you would actually be allowed to leave Russia. So Kalinin asked him, why would you want to leave beloved Mother Russia? By some miracle, he actually got an audience with Kalinin. And Kalinin said to him, why do you want to leave Mother Russia? And he said, because that his wife has this ailment and she needs to go to see the best doctors in the world, which are in Riga. Kalinin signed the document and he moved to Latvia. The famous Rabbi Mordechai Dubin, who was instrumental in helping many, many Jews who had come to Riga, suggested that Nachum Yosef's father take a job in Riga in some shul, and he would take on half of the salary. Mordechai Dubin would pay 50% of the salary of any rabbinical position he would find. But to his good fortune, he could not find any rabbinical positions at all in Latvia. I say to his good fortune because he couldn't find anything there, he had to move from Latvia, and instead he moved to London, and that's how he was saved from the Germans. This was when Nachum Yosef was 9 years old. Nachum Yosef came with his father to London, and as he grew older, he worked with and helped his father in his rabbinical position. So this was the a story of Mrs. Binyaminsen's father-in-law, Rachmiel Binyaminsen. Rachmiel Binyaminsen had moved from Latvia to London, where he worked in a rabbinical position. And at that time, there were certain Moshe Meisels who did business in Ireland, and because he was very friendly with the Binyaminsons, and he would visit the Binyaminsons, when he went to visit Ireland, he happened to stay at the Würzburger's home, and he met Zlata Würzburger, and he was the one who suggested that Zlata Würzburger might be a good shidduch for Nachum Yosef Binyaminsen. So and that's how they got married. So in 1948, this Nachum Yosef's father Yachmiel had a big problem in his health, because the fog in London and the weather and the rain in London wasn't good for his health. He's an elderly man already, and he needed to move somewhere else. He asked the previous Rebbe what to do, and the previous Rebbe thought it would be good for him to move to Montreal, and that's where they moved. And in Montreal, he took upon himself, by the suggestion of the previous Rebbe, he became the head of the yeshiva in Montreal, and he was a real force, a real dedicated chassid of the previous Rebbe in Montreal. So this chassid, Rabbi Yerachmiel Binyamin, was actually was also very instrumental in the Rebbe's taking on upon himself the leadership of Hasidim. Interesting thing happened. He went to visit the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe that it's not fair for the Rebbe to refuse to become the leader of the Hasidim. Everyone needs him. And he told the Rebbe these words: for us, the elderly ones will find the solution. But what about the young people? For the sake of the young people, shouldn't you accept upon yourself to be their Rebbe? And the Rebbe responded, the young people? I never let go of the young people. I never let go of them. That's what the Rebbe said. So Rabbi Binyamin walked out of the Rebbe's room, and he told everyone, we have a Rebbe. If that's what the Rebbe is saying, that's clear that he is accepting upon himself to be the Rebbe. Anyway, so his son Nachum Yosef was then still living in London, and in 1951 he thought it would be good for himself to move to Montreal to be with his father, and so he asked the Rebbe. Previous Rebbe already passed away in 1950, so he asked the Rebbe if it would be a good idea for him to move to Montreal, and the Rebbe said it would be better for him to first try something in America. So the Rebbe suggested he speak to his secretary, Bechadakov, who would arrange all the necessary papers for him to find a position instead in America. So Rabbi Chadakov had connected him to a community in the Bronx, and he became a rabbi in this shul. He moved to America, they got all the paperwork, and they moved for a short while to the Bronx. He stayed in the Bronx for a couple of months, and he had a home right next to the shul. But for whatever reason, they didn't like it in the Bronx, and they wrote again to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe agreed that they should move to Montreal. So that's how they had this green card. She realized, Zlata Binyamin realized that's why they had this green card, because of their move to the Bronx. Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary, had arranged for them to get this green card. So, armed with this green card, Yerachmiel Binyamin went to the immigration office. Immigration office is teeming with people, hundreds of people in line, and his mother is an elderly woman. So he asked, would they allow his mother to skip the line because she's an elderly woman? And he showed the lady at the desk the green cards that he had. The lady was shocked. The cards are no longer green. The cards don't have the same function anymore. The cards are so much limited, so limited in comparison to what they used to do. And so the clerk by the desk, she screams, everybody come see what I found, what this guy has. No one had ever brought to the immigration office. This woman was bringing something to the immigration office that no one ever seen before. And so all the clerks came over. She has a real green card. And very quickly, the head of the whole office over there in New York took upon himself personally to arrange her permanent status in the United States, and she was able to get all everything she needed, including Medicaid and all of her medical needs. She unfortunately she passed away in 2018 on the 15th of Teves. Interesting thing is, in the 15th of Teves, in Hayom Yom, the previous Rebbe writes, don't believe in the false prophets or saying all kinds of things that will happen after the war is over. Instead, the previous Rebbe said, it's the time of the redemption. We have to prepare ourselves for the coming Mashiach, who is coming speedily soon, literally soon, Korov Mamash. So that Hayom Yom, for the date of her passing, interestingly, that Hayom Yom was taken, that passage that the Rebbe wrote to be studied on that day was taken from a letter the previous Rebbe had written to her father-in-law, Rabbi Rachmiel ben Yaminson. And the previous Rebbe gives a bracha in that letter to her husband, Chacham Yosef. Anyways, the point is that the reason why they were able to she was able to move after her husband's passing to America was because of the Rebbe's instructing them years before to move first to the Bronx. They went to the Bronx only for a short while. But that move protected her in the last 11 years of her life until 2018 when she passed away, that she should actually be able to be with her children and to have medical care was because of that instruction. So the bottom line is, during this last 24 hours before we accept the Torah in holiday of Shavuos, the Rebbe says there's a time we're supposed to think about the words that our grandparents said at the foot of Mount Sinai. We will do even before we understand, and to not just to remember the past, but to ask ourselves: are we approaching our service of Hashem in that way, or are we just? Does that make sense first? Or we're ready to go, like a grandparent said, we will do even before we understand. And when we said that, what did God say? God said, "Who revealed to my children the secret?" What does that mean? Who revealed to my children the secret? How do we possibly know something that God is wondering about? The answer is there is a secret. The secret means the love that every Jew has for Hashem. And who means the way Hashem is beyond all limitations. The way Hashem can't be described by any name. The way Hashem is described only as who. He who is beyond all description. On this day, Hashem reveals in each of us this secret love we have for Hashem, so that we're able to actually fully and emphatically declare we will do even before we understand. Hashem bless us all, each of us, to receive the Torah with joy and inspiration, and we should see immediately coming Mashiach when we will see the Torah Chadasha, the new revelation of Torah that will be revealed to Mashiach Tzedekenu. Good vach, a freiliche Woche, and a gute Yonte, Kabbalah.